and thanks for joining us today. I'm Thea Backlar, Vice President of Data and Analytics at Ogury.
And I'm David Bieselin, Senior Vice President of Engineering here at Ogury. And today we're going to talk about an advertising concept that you may or may not have heard of called personification.
And I know some of the audience might be thinking, what is personification, Dave?
Right. Is it personalization spelt wrong?
I don't know. It could be. Let's find out.
Okay.
So for some context of how this concept came about, we have to go back to the fact that every day, personal data is used and abused by some companies that want to exploit people for profit. It's hard to believe. You would think that with more and more fines and backlash in the court of public opinion, and sometimes in real courts as well, the big MarTech companies would be anxious to offer a palatable solution to consumers. However, new solutions that are being proposed are even more invasive than before. So if you can believe it, some companies are using email identifiers, physical addresses, as if we were back in the 90s, or even device graphs. But it really doesn't have to be this way. Our solution uses audience interests to deliver superior performance while protecting consumer privacy. And that's really important. It's about the superior performance and on top of it, protecting the consumer privacy. And this data qualifies impressions rather than individual users. That's how we can do that.
That's right, Thea. But before I go on to describe personification, it might be useful for me to talk a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes. As an engineer who works day in and day out in the back-end services of an ad tech company, it is interesting to understand how ad tech companies can serve ads so fast. Many ad tech companies have a list of identifiers that they have pre-segmented into audiences. Then, based on the ad request, they have an easy time in selecting the ads because all they have to do is match the identifier of the ad request to the audience and they are done. No thinking required. I'm oversimplifying, but you get the idea. The interesting part about this is that if you are clever, truly clever, there are other ways of doing this, ways that protect consumer privacy and are future-proof. For this, let's head back to the year 2015 when Gartner first coined the term personification. It essentially reimagines a world where consumers are presented with ads not based on their personal identity, but rather on inferred membership into a persona segment. And so in this less intrusive way of doing business, it's much less intrusive to the consumer. And this concept has become the foundation for a new class of technology that we call personified advertising. Now, of course, brands can continue to work with companies that use tracking methods, but they just need to know that this pool of data is shrinking as traditional identifiers are going away. If brands go with companies that are using alternative first-party data solutions, like hashed email addresses, for example, brands will limit their distribution to only those users who have actively identified themselves to a publisher. Then these users will also have to consent to having their data shared with the ad tech company. This is required in order for the ad tech company to build the model where the user has gone. And of course, the acceptance rate of modern consent managers that are truly GDPR compliant is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50%. And so basically, half of your logged in users is available to advertisers in order for them to reach their audiences. And that's why I'm saying that the brands have a limited pool from which to advertise.
Yeah, so that's really what we've been trying to solve for. So our personified advertising engine changes this completely by using audience data to qualify impressions rather than personal data to qualify users. The data is founded on how audiences use their mobile phones, understanding the mobile journey of audiences across apps and sites, and that's a really important part of it. And this gives a really in-depth understanding of audience interests. This personification data set has the power to reveal really cool insights, like the fact that the #1 interest of gym enthusiasts is career development, which I didn't know until recently, or that readers of Rolling Stones magazine are far more likely to want to travel than the general population. And I don't know why, but somehow they prefer Las Vegas. So knowing those types of audience interests can really enhance advertisers' targeting performance.
Right, and from our experience, we know that data science can predict audience interest with a very high degree of certainty based on all the data we have created our AI models from. But the part that is even more exciting is how we put all the pieces together for a completely consumer-friendly in a future-proof way. If you take historical mobile data journey and enrich it and validate it with survey data and audience ad choice data, as well as contextual and semantic information, it equates to a continual cycle of learning and optimization. For an example of a survey, you can have, for mail online's audiences, whether or not they run more than 3 times a week. If more people say yes to that, then basically we know that that interest is validated on that site. And if more people say no to that question, then we know that interest is not one of the interests of the audience of that site. And the beauty of the ad choice data is that as we process it, it's essentially self-targeting data. Through the audience's ad selection and interactions, we can see what the audience is most interested in. And this further enhance the understanding of our audience. And all these elements combined is the data that we use for a personified advertising engine. And so this enables us to continually enrich and provide great insights and advertising performance.
It sounds a little complex, but this new methodology answers the challenge of how to offer effective and sustainable advertising anchored in consumer privacy protection. So this is kind of like our onion of all of these layers. And with personified advertising solutions, brands can still receive great performance and incredible insights. That's super important, obviously, to what brands are looking for. But on top of it, it's all respecting consumers at the same time. And to be honest, at the end of the day, we feel pretty good about what we do.
Right, and that's also why marketers should care. Everyone benefits, from the media agencies, to the brands they represent, to the publishers, but most importantly, the consumer. Personification is the best way to reach consumers in a data-safe way, something that should be front and center on everyone's mind, much more important than, let's say, Google's delay of the cookie death. It's inevitable, and also we believe that this is where the advertising future is going, and the innovation here is just remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to get too nerdy here, but I think it's really relevant to quote Shakespeare, who said, "Defer no time, delays have dangerous ends." So really the point is that there's little point in doing things how they've always been done for fear of change. In fact, the move to personified advertising is yet another cog in our industry's mission of building brands and their equity in the eyes of the consumer.
Well said, Thea, and that's a great place to leave our audience with today.
Thanks, Dave. And yeah, unfortunately, we really wanted to be there in person. However, we weren't able to make it, but please do come by our Ogury speaker and VIP lounge. You can discuss brand strategy with us. You can just simply relax and talk about COVID or not talk about COVID. We'd be more than happy to chat with you there.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.